Dobrodošli na Descon 6 online od 27. do 31. oktobra.
Welcome everyone and welcome to the Feminist Futures. It's a fantastic evening here in Belgrade. It's rainy and cold and a little bit freezing. So it's nice to be inside and warm and surrounded with lovely Helene and Katrin, who are leading our workshop today on Feminist Futures. They've been doing this work for quite some time, and there is quite a significant Feminist Futures archive on the net that you can find. And hopefully, if we are so inspired, some of our works may end up here after an hour. But I'm not here to judge, just to explain how we're going to work together, and to really thank so much to Katrin and Helene for volunteering to have the workshop today and to take us through that. So with that, I pass on the mic to Katrin, who's going to take us through her presentation. And I'll mute myself.
Thank you so much. That's amazing. We're super happy that we can be here and gonna do a small Feminist Futures workshop with you. So yeah, Helene is over there, me is Katrin, and we are running these workshops since...
I see I should not share my screen.
It would be great if you share yours.
The problem is that if I leave the room, we may just have to log in again, set up the link, and it may help with my audio because we haven't started, and but it may not. But if you all hear yourself really well, then we can just go on. So back to you, Katrin. Can an admin make Katrin a presenter, please, Steven?
Great, thank you. So we've been running these Feminist Futures workshops for 1.5 years now. And yeah, today we do another one. We're creating this archive that Helene is going to tell you more about.
Can you do that if Steven's not hearing me?
Yes, sorry, everything is okay. Steven heard you and made Katrin the presenter, so...
I got the presenter, thank you. Yeah, so right now we've decided that we're going to record this session, so I think we will work a lot with the chat, if that's okay for everyone. If there's anything that you not want to mention, or if you don't want to introduce yourself, that's also totally fine. And we also want to take some notes in the chat with you, or also you have this shared notes on the site that we might use later. So please feel free to take notes and share your thoughts on that. And also we're really going to write some stories. So if you have pen and paper ready, or if you want to do it on your laptop, that would be amazing. And if you want to, we also publish these stories on our Feminist Futures archive later. So feel free and keep that in mind. And feminism is a super important and interesting topic, but there are different viewpoints, and we really want to acknowledge all the different knowledge that comes in and all the different practices, so there's no right or wrong. So what are we going to do? We will have some brief introductions, who is in this room. Then I'm going to talk a bit about why feminist tech. So what does a feminist perspective on tech help us to tackle, and how can we learn and gain more knowledge on the social structures that we're in tech. Then we're going to think a bit like what sucks about the internet, or what problems we have. And then Helene is going to take over, and we're going to really create our own imaginations, our own futures, and reimagine kind of the internet that we want to see. And in the end, if you feel like, we can also report back, which means that you can tell us a bit about what you wrote or what you imagined, and we can have a discussion to maybe also derive some strategies for the now, what we can change. Also, please feel free, if there is any question, just ask it in the chat. And I would start with some introductions. So I'm going to hand over to Helene. Maybe you can tell your name and describe the internet in one word, and then you can hand it over to someone else. Thank you.
Hey everyone, my name is Helene. Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm very excited about this session and very curious on what we will figure out together. Today, I am together with Katrin. I have founded the think tank MOTIF here in Berlin 2 years ago, and I do research and workshops and talks. Feminist Futures is kind of my favorite format of MOTIF. So if you have any questions about the project, you can also ask them in the chat or email us later. And when I think of the internet in one word, I would say network. And I will pass on to Milicia. Would you like to introduce yourself?
You can also write it just in the chat if you want to, whatever you prefer. I see people writing. Des, are you still here? Knowledge, okay.
Knowledge, yeah.
Yeah, maybe you can all type in your answers, or in case someone wants to say something, just unmute yourselves. Feel free. We're a small group. Knowledge as well. Des, you wanted to say something?
No, I'm fine. I have joined you through another channel so I can get the voice. That's all.
Great.
Okay, it's difficult to get unmuted.
So you, Deborah, you should just click on your I think you joined as a listen-in mode because you only have the headphones. And so if you try to get out of the room and come back and join with the mic, and are you using Chrome by any chance?
Yes. Annette or Stefan, anything from your side? Milena, also community, okay. Miloš and Peter, is there something else that you art? Okay, cool.
Hi. Well, I just use my normal name, Annette, no pseudonym. How would I describe the internet in one word? I think I need 2 words, fun and pain in one word. Well, about myself, I'm involved in net politics for a while, and I'm really curious on the feminist side.
Great, thank you so much. Deborah is also reconnected with the mic now. Do you want to say something, or you want to write in the chat?
Oh, let me also wave to you if I can. Hello. Yeah, as I wrote and somebody else as well, for me, internet represents knowledge because it's such a source of information. But at the same time, as I worked in science for quite some time, it's a big source of misinformation as well. So I'm running into more and more trouble in establishing myself as a scientist, especially as a young female person in internet communities, and that's something which is clearly getting totally off the rails. So when it comes to the internet, having like trustful resources and like people are having difficulties to understanding what and who to trust.
Thank you so much, Deborah. That's also a great topic for your fiction stories later, for an internet of trust, I guess. Okay, great. I'm going to continue with the presentation and talk a bit about like why do we even think of feminist tech. So in the Feminist Futures workshop and also in the project in general, we build on a lot of different sources and people that have been working on feminism and tech. One of the main sources that we are using is from the feminist principles of the internet, that is by the APC network. And they've published some principles that really show that feminism is like not only about women, but about like the whole LGBTQI community, and also, you know, about general digital human rights. And it's a very useful lens kind of to approach certain issues that come up with the internet. Miloš, did you want to say something? Or in case not, then please could you unmute yourself? Thank you. So feminism is not just one approach, but it can have many different approaches from different cultures, and the very idea is that it acknowledges those different realities, those different contexts, and those different specifics. So really approaching technology from an intersectional kind of view that acknowledges, you know, language, background, educational background, gender, and realizing what kind of new social inequalities emerge, but also what kind of new possibilities can emerge, is one of the key points of feminism. So when we're doing this workshop for 2 hours, we also take quite some time to talk about feminist moments in our lives. I think with an online session that's a bit difficult, but maybe everyone can take a second and think about like a feminist situation they had when they realized, you know, wow, I'm experiencing some kind of social inequality, or I'm experiencing some kind of privilege that others might don't have. And that's the very basis of feminism. So there's also this really nice quote by the feminist internet, I think it's called, from London. It's a collective from Goldsmiths University, where they say there is not only one internet, there is many internets, and there is not only one feminism, there is many feminisms. So acknowledging the plurality about how we are experiencing the internet, and also acknowledging the plurality of feminisms that we have. And by laying kind of the ground for this acknowledgement, then the APC principles make a lot of sense and can help understand a lot of issues that are actually coming up with the internet. So I'm going to talk you through a bit about the principles, because I think it shows the many kinds of social and environmental inequalities that can come up. So one aspect is access to internet. That means that feminist principles can tackle access to internet itself, but also the hardware around it. So making sure that everyone has access to the internet and also access to the knowledge base. Movements and public participation is a principle that's around the right to resistance. So making communities, forming communities, and having also communities of trust in which you can communicate properly and form political action. The expression is a principle that is a lot about the amplification of feminist discourse on the internet, so ensuring that feminists are heard and also can form a community, but it's also about freedom of expression and avoiding harmful content such as revenge porn or pornography in general. Economy is about the very idea of open source on the one side, so ensuring that everything is open access, open source, that everyone can make use of the resources, but also it means alternative economies, so exploring things like circular economies on the internet could be another principle for it. And then agency as the last one, which is a lot about the question of consent and also on privacy issues and data rights. So who owns my data? What kind of data do I put on the internet in general, etc. So I gave you a quick review of the APC principles just so you can get an idea how broad the topic is. I'm going to post a link of it in it as well. And I would now take 3 minutes. Maybe we can work on the shared notes, if that is fine with everyone. And we think what issues come up from your perspective, what kind of things, suck on the internet, what is in your mind. That can be from surveillance to revenge porn. Yeah, Helene?
Yeah, maybe, or if you have experienced any inequalities yourself online, you can as well think of this. So it doesn't have to be like on a meta level, it can also be on a personal level. And as Katrin already mentioned, we can think of like really big problems such as, patriarchal power structures by surveillance, or even the smallest sexist comment is as well interesting. So from your own feminist perspective, just take 3 minutes and think of problems you're facing on the internet. And yeah, I think there's this great option to share notes. So just feel free to write down what comes to your mind. Okay, looks great. There's already a lot going on the shared notes.
Yeah, I like how it's growing and growing.
Yeah, me too. I would like to have a video of this for the archive. So we have a lack of support for free software. We have violence online, misinformation, of course. The problem of making money with data. And I also like of course I don't like it, but it's a funny, kind of a funny story that each unknown person who adds them on social network ends up being a major creep. I know the issue for sure.
That's very personal, yeah.
And the age gap, obviously.
Ageism, yes, definitely. And also the progress towards open science. That's a huge point. And then obviously verbal harassment, but also online violence and stalking. Great. Thank you so much. I think that's already great. Does someone want to say something about it? Or Helene, what do you think?
Yeah, if anyone would like to make a comment, you can also switch on your microphone. Okay, if not, then I would suggest we move on so that we still have some time to get creative. Okay, so yeah, thank you so much for all this input. This is already a lot to think of. That is very important. All of the topics are very important, and I think they are a great basis for our next step. Because yeah, what I would like to talk a little bit now is imagination and narration as practices, as feminist practices, and yeah, also as a collective tool for social change. Because I think we have to become aware of our right to envision and therefore to co-create the future. Because people who talk about possible futures automatically shape the collective idea of what a future could look like. And I think some guys in Silicon Valley have already understood this quite well. For example, when they talk about humanity moving to Mars, for example. But here's the thing, each of us has their own imagination, so each of us has the right to talk about the future, and by doing so, and by telling a lot of people about it, we can as well collectively shape the discourse about a better and more equal future for and also with the internet. Plus, I believe that imagining futures also helps us to derive strategies for the present. So if we have a very particular idea about what a better future or more equal future could look like, I think this helps us a lot to see and to come up with the next steps that we have to take in our present in order to get one step closer to this possible future. So, therefore, next slide, please. Therefore, we have developed this workshop format, and we have already conducted it more than 20 times with groups of the civil society, but also at scientific conferences in different countries and also online. And our idea is that we work on alternative feminist futures for the internet, and then we are collecting these stories about possible futures and exhibit them on our Feminist Futures archive. And the Feminist Futures archive is a website. It's you can find it under feministfutures.net very easily. And by doing the workshops and by exhibiting the visions of a feminist future, we aim to diversify the discourse on technological futures and also to add a feminist voice to these debates about technology and the internet. Yeah, this is what the archive looks like at the moment.
I think it's loading.
Okay. Okay, no worries. The slide is not that important anyways. Maybe the next one. Yes, so I hope you're, no worries. I hope you're ready to take action. Are there any questions so far? I will check out the chat. Ah, yeah, there's the Feminist Futures website, perfect. Okay, so please have your pen and paper ready, or your drawing material, or your laptop, whatever you like, and then choose one of the previously discussed problems on the internet that we have collected in the shared notes. take a couple of minutes to choose your problem that you consider most important. And once you have chosen one problem, we would invite you to take 10 to 15 minutes to think of a better future and how this problem could be tackled or even solved in the year 2030. And you can get creative, you can write a poem, you can draw a cartoon, you can write a little science fiction story, and everything is allowed. And whatever comes to your mind is fine. And I would suggest that we meet back here at 6:15, and who wants to can share their stories.
Yeah, maybe as a quick side note, I don't know who participated in Joanna's talk on Tuesday, which I found very interesting because at the end she talked a lot about this issue of reimagining futures, and that it's a very hard task to reimagine what we're already seeing. But we found that while we were doing this workshop, that it actually just needs like some time and some space and some pen and paper to just sit down and think about the alternative futures. And I don't think that, well, very often people approach us and say, yeah, I can't solve, I don't know, capitalism or something. But it might not be the most important thing to solve like the biggest problem, but also just to have a small idea. So, for example, envisioning a space in which we can have trustworthy conversations again and share knowledge equally is already really fine. And to make a piece of drawing about this space or write a small poem on it, that's already a really important and necessary approach. So it doesn't have to be the solution for everything, but just like the willingness to get into this space and rethink a bit what we could do and what we could imagine. Is there any questions or comments from your side so far?
There's a book recommendation. That's always good. Thank you.
Oh, nice. Thank you so much. Envisioning Real Utopias.
Okay. Does anyone have a question about the task?
Well, Annette here. 15 minutes to be on my own working on it?
We can also do 10 minutes if that's too long for you. Or you can also team up with someone. If you know someone else here in the call, you can get into a private chat and start a conversation in there.
Okay, then let's say 10 minutes. And there was also the question if we can also type here in the notes. I would say yes, for sure, of course.
Definitely.
And maybe we can hear some music while we are writing.
Yes, we can, and also we can have a breakout rooms if you feel like having a, we can create a breakout rooms, and that's going to be random, and you're going to end up being in a room with someone else you didn't think you're going to be with, and you can work together on a shared notepad, but just remember to copy it. So let's do that. Let's have. How many there's like 10 of us, so if we have 2 breakout rooms is the minimum, so let's have 3, or if anybody wants to have more, or 4.
Okay,
let's say
how many?
I would say if we do the breakout rooms, then I would say we do 15 minutes, because then people can also start talking with each other now. So we meet back here at 6:20.
Yes, sounds good.
Okay, meet back, and so you'll randomly be chosen. Duration time is going to be 15 minutes, and randomly assign. Okay, create. So it should take us into a different room. Somebody needs to put a, okay.
We need to open up the other server room 1 second, but we're back now. We're all back, and we still have 10 minutes to go. So welcome back, everyone, after our thoughtful pause. And who wants to report first, or how are we going to do that? I pass this back on to Katrin and Helene to take us, collect answers that people.
Yeah, I can already see people writing a lot in the share notes. Very interesting. Does anybody want to tell about their ideas by switching on their microphones? You don't have to be shy.
Milena?
Yep. Hi, Milena.
You want to start?
Hi, good evening. I was in the room with Annette, so let me invite Annette to join us, maybe. I'm not sure if you can.
Yes, great. What did you come up with?
We actually talked about, I started basically with, hi. I started, I guess, because of my long-time experience working for let's say decades with refugees and migrants, and which has always been in, 90s in the Balkans, and then as of recently 2015 with the migrant crisis, etc. So I basically, when you said one word that describes internet, for me it's a refuge. And it is refuge in terms of knowledge, in terms of safety, in terms of prosperity, in terms of name it, and in very literally talking, I just talked to Annette, it's, for a lot of people who've been wondering, these Balkan route particularly, and I'm talking because I'm from Serbia, Serbia, it's, for a lot of them, it was refuge in many ways, particularly for the women, not to mention for the girls, who really saw it as a refuge opportunity to learn or to, have access basically to everyone else who's not female, like this, no problem. But for girls, particularly refugees or migrants, it is life-saver. And okay, generally for this population is life-saver, which is a kind of really most vulnerable ones, because refugees are already vulnerable, but the girls, young girls, and women, girls, they are even more vulnerable category. So we started discussion, we started like that. And then Annette also added, and I totally agree. So maybe Annette, you can go on, or should I?
Yeah, well, thank you, Milena. I think it was a very interesting round, because we started with those who have almost nothing and are in a very precarious situation. And I added my idea of what I think is a severe problem, not only to the internet, but to the whole IT technology development with artificial intelligence, where I think there is a huge gender gap. There should be much more feminist study on the fact that the billions go in research on AI, for the guys who are not able to create a real human, but they want to create an artificial human instead. And it is something we really don't need. And billions go into this research, and we would need this money for some real good stuff, for the improvement of life of people, instead of creating this super intelligence bullshit. And along with this goes super surveillance infrastructure, which is also no fun. And so I think there is some feminist approach. So I thought this was really nice meeting here, because we thought we have the refugees with nothing, and we have the billions here, and there is a lot about women and girls to say. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. Those are both very interesting perspectives. Would anyone like to either comment or present their own visions?
Who wrote this vision for 2030? I really like it.
It was Lara, and I was in the breakout room with her.
My microphone is really weird, so I'll type stuff.
Okay, great. That's also great. Des, do you want to talk a bit about our vision with the 4 drivers of the apotheosis? Now we can't hear you, unfortunately. I think something with your mic is going on. Still not. Well, I can try talking. Now it works.
Okay, it works now. Too many laptops open.
Oh, I think it's still a backlash in here.
Sorry. It worked finally at the end of the session, my microphone. I really don't know what's going on. So we were talking about how we have now 4 women in the leadership in the internet. From the Association for Progressive Communication, Henriette Esterhuizen is leading the IGF, the UN IGF, and then we have Mirja, who's the chair of the Internet Architecture Board, and then we have Alice Cooper, she's the chair of the Internet Engineering Task Force, and then we have Miriam Kune, who's the chair of the RIPE NCC. So the fact is that we imagined these 4 riders of apocalypse, but we turned it over to apotheosis, which means that you reach the summit of development. And then when we have these 4 women in the driving seat, they will. That was the vision Katrin and I talked about.
Thank you so much for summing it up.
Have more spaces, and but I think apotheosis is coming.
Yes, that's a great metaphor. We have to believe it.
Now I don't hear Katrin. Oh, I'm sorry. Darn.
You don't hear, but do you hear me, Helene?
Yes, I can hear you. Yeah,
it's been great fun.
It's been great.
I enjoyed it. So thank you again. We will stop the recording button now. We will send you the raw recordings, and then you can decide. We can chop it off and keep the chat and send you that as well. And if you agree, we can publish either the presentation or some parts of it on the YouTube channel. So
definitely.
Fun seeing all of you.
Thank you so
Laura,
much.
Bye. We don't see you. Miloš, bye.
And
Laura,
if you briefly come in contact with us, let us know.
Milena, bye.
Thank you so much.
Going to another room for another program. If you want the link, we can give you. You can join us. Do you want the link? I'll type it in here.
I think I sent it already.
Dobrodošli na Descon 6 online od 27. do 31. oktobra.
Poštovani sugrađani, u skladu sa naredbom Vlade Republike Srbije i odlukama kriznih štabova, a u cilju vaše bezbednosti i bezbednosti svih sugrađana, napustite park odmah.
Dobrodošli u MTS Contact Center. Da prijavite smetnju za internet uslugu, pritisnite 3. Zahtev se obrađuje. Molimo vas, sačekajte.
So anyways, I've been thinking about this. Man, everybody's at home. What is internet bandwidth globally? What's it looking like right now? Being in demand substantially more than it already was, which was plenty. Can the global internet infrastructure, can it deal? Can it cope? And it's probably not the correct terminology, but can it cope with the demands that the isolated individuals are putting on it?
Kućna izolacija dovodi, ajde da tako to kažemo, gužve u virtualnom svetu. Gledanje filmova i serija preko interneta kao i učestalije igranje video igara dovelo je do masovnijeg prometa interneta širom sveta. Drastično povećan promet zabeležen je i u Americi, u Australiji, Indiji i Japanu, u kome je korišćenje interneta poraslo za čak 70%. Kako sve to utiče na internet ekosistem i da li će mreže u Srbiji moći da opstanu u takvim uslovima, reći će nam Andrej Petrovski iz Share fondacije. Gospodine Petrovski, hvala što ste sa nama. Prema izveštaju SOX-a, odnosno otvorene platforme za saradnju operatera i content provajdera, u Srbiji je upotreba interneta porasla za 10 do 15%. Da li će nam takvi procenti napraviti probleme? Gospodine Petrovski, da li se čujemo? Pokušat ćemo kasnije. Jasno vam je da se ovakve stvari dešavaju.
Kompanija Facebook objavila je da je u cilju izbjegavanja zagušenja interneta u Evropi privremeno smanjila brzine protoka video sadržaja na svojim društvenim mrežama Facebook i Instagram. Do ove mere je došlo nakon velikog skoka u korišćenju interneta usled uvođenja vanrednih mera širom Evrope, koje zahtevaju rad od kuće i društvenu izolaciju. Prethodno su kompanije Netflix i Google najavile da će prilagoditi sistem emitovanja svog video sadržaja novonastaloj situaciji.
Desperate times call for desperate measures. So, ideas to reduce the strain on internet networks across the continent, and the European Union authorities have specifically requested this in order to keep digital traffic flowing. So, these various services have all agreed they're turning the quality down in order to facilitate a greater distribution given the load that this is putting on certain networks. And I think you probably agree too that the most important thing would be to get a stream. When you're sitting there, you got nothing to do. You're isolated. So you turn it down for everybody else. What's going on here? Is the stream okay? Live. I'm stressing here.
Dobrodošli na Descon 6 online od 27. do 31. oktobra.
Dobro večer svima. Dobro večer Filipe. Ovo je treći dan Descona, so we're going to switch to English now since we said our intros with the Share Bulletin news. And it's a great pleasure to have and welcome everyone back on a third day of our COVID-19 Descon online edition. So it's really appropriate to see how our networks are holding up and how the users experience the internet. And we have a good lineup of two presenters. First one being Filip Milošević, who's an artist, an engineer, an activist with Share Foundation, and he'll share with us his views and first-hand experience. And immediately afterwards, we're gonna hear from Jari Arkko, who is the senior expert at Ericcsson and also an internet architecture board member, and he'll also share his views. So it's great to see everyone back, and I hope the links worked for you. We also just finished a fantastic workshop on feminist futures, and you'll be able to see the recordings as well as the recordings of today's session at the latest next week. So welcome everyone, and Filip, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Des. Hopefully everyone can hear me. What I've realized when I Googled Jari Arkko, who's going to talk after me, is that he's kind of serious, really serious guy. And he follows the whole global thing, I think. And he seems to me like a network engineer. So what I'm going to do is more focus on the local issues that we had at one point. So name of this presentation is Crisis versus Infrastructure, and it's a lightning talk, so I have around 25 slides, I think like 30 seconds per slide, so I'm already back in the schedule, so let's go. For the intro, you were listening to Share BBS, as in Bulletin Board System. Some people who grew up on early internet know what is it, but it's our podcast, a dynamic audio podcast on technology, society, and cyberspace. So it's mostly in Serbian, but if you didn't hear it yet, try it out at Telegram, Share BBS, share this thing, underline BBS. And we also have RSS with and YouTube playlist also, and Spotify, and I want to say Apple podcasts and everything. So we distribute pretty much everywhere, and we follow these topics we're working on. I can't use my keyboard. Okay, so recently in Share Foundation, we're a digital rights organization, and we work a lot lately, and especially now when the crisis started. So we produced a lot of content related to the health crisis and the internet and the digital rights and everything, and all of this we summed up recently in one publication called The Internet in the Times of Pandemic. It is like a survival kit, we call it like this. You can download it on our website, and soon we're going to print it out and send out to people like in a small, cute physical form once the whole internet breaks down, that people can just read it like they used to. This is some content that you can see over there. In example, these are the illustrations from a story about two viruses. One is the real one, and the one is ransomware. I think it was a WannaCry ransomware. So we were actually trying to explain how they are related, how the real virus and how the computer virus are transmitting, what do they do, and all this stuff. So this is a bilingual article on our website. Some of the more interesting stuff we actually translate to English. So we have a nice global community of digital rights organization activists and privacy enthusiasts. So we're happy that we can translate a lot of stuff that we do. This is a map that is going to go with the physical edition of this guide. We called it COVID-19 Express. It's like a metro map, but it's actually a timeline of the main events. I know you cannot see this, but this is why I faked the zoom effect. And this is the timeline in several actually streams of what was going on with the digital rights, with the pandemic, with the information, infodemics and stuff. And today we will actually focus on these two. This is the date 15th of March when we had the first curfew, and this is the 17th of March when we started working on these issues of infrastructure and how we had the problems and how to solve them. And let's talk about it. So globally, I have one graph. I guess Jari will talk more about it, because I saw he's working on some workshops and has a lots of papers coming and receiving. So these are just some data that we can see that on internet exchange points by country, the traffic was higher. It was growing in March 2020, which is, we all know, I mean, it happens. We all stayed home, we used internet a lot, and that was pretty normal. Some of the key messages that the papers I read were telling that, okay, the demand was 60% increase in internet traffic, but then it was only probably around 15-20% in some internet exchange points. I think our local Serbian exchange SOX wasn't affected pretty much at all. And that network operators and content providers have to, they successfully maintained services and efficiently utilized pre-existing capacity, and in certain cases expanded this capacity, which sounds pretty much as a success story all around the world. I read a lot of these success stories that actually they were saying that everything went really well, the backbone was really strong, that we will be doing fine. So internet exchange points and SOCs were fine. Research papers globally concluding it was a success story. But when COVID-19 erupted in Serbia and the first curfews began, mobile carriers, internet service providers, and businesses dependent on them were struggling at different points in time and space. This is what we actually felt on our own skin. So this is one of my favorite tweets I found today from 16th of March. It's really dystopian. Someone said, it just started. It's starting. Maxi, which is a grocery store in some street, they're not taking cards, credit cards. They cannot accept them. So something's big going on. Then we have a lot of complaints from the users of our local mobile carriers that their services are not working. Neither calls, texts, internet. Then we have this press release from one of the 3 biggest mobile carriers here. They're saying something like, because of the technical problems on a global scale, which was a lie, our users had problems with using data and stuff, but we found a solution and now everything is fine. So basically, we realized that a lot of stuff is going on. Nobody wants to admit it. Some of the companies said everything will be fine, and so on. So why did this happen? How could it be avoided? And what are the possible future scenarios or solutions for data flow in this and some other future crises? First of all, I want to point you, if you're not familiar with how the internet works, how our data flows, you can go to labs.rs, which is one of the Share Foundation projects, and read a really nice story called Invisible Infrastructures, The Exciting Life of Internet Packet. It's my colleague Vladan Joler, who will be talking tomorrow, I think, on Descon. He really, in a nice way, was explaining how our packets, when we start from our computer and search for something on the internet, where our traffic actually goes through, which points, which exchanges, what are the points of power, how did it all happen historically, how the internet actually centralized from being decentralized, and so on. So if you're not a network engineer or really technically literate, you should go and read this. It's really nice. So what is he also talking about is these bottlenecks. So bottlenecks in the internet are mostly internet exchange points, but in more general term, for it's expression for a system that has been reduced or slowed due to limited resources or components. The bottleneck occurs in a network when there are too many users attempting to access a specific resource. And this is exactly what happened with us. So, if not internet exchange points, what were the bottlenecks and their causes on 16th of March 2020? So, as I previously said, IXPs and lots of tests were showing that there were no problems with the data flows, everything was fine, but then like why did our services didn't run, our internet wouldn't work as soon as the curfew started? So the answer is last mile. Basically, it's our local infrastructure, not the general global one. So by last mile, what do we think of? I've tried to think of several cases. So let's go through them. First, 2.4 and 5 gigahertz bands on our Wi-Fi. So basically, if a lot of people in one building starts using internet at the same time, there's a lot of traffic in this Wi-Fi spectrum. So these channels that we sometimes can even choose, like on the old fixed phones, become really saturated. So if you live in a really densely populated area, no matter how your internet service provider is doing in their data center, you can have issues with your Wi-Fi bands, and this is what happens often with the routers. Next, it's this building and street cabinets, switches and routers. So basically, we all have, if we go through Wi-Fi or the Ethernet cable or whatever, our traffic, our data, our packets needs to go through the buildings and street cabinets before they reach the bigger exchange points. So in Serbia especially, maybe not in developed countries, this infrastructure is not so good. The same as building and street cabinets, we have issues with mobile base stations because we all connect with our mobile phones to the three base stations at the same time. And if these get overcrowded, then they just stop working. So this is something that happens often on big events if the infrastructure is not better for this purpose. So it also happens a lot on protests, in example. So that's why some activists sometimes are like, oh, they're filtering or censoring internet. They're turning off the internet, so we couldn't like send Instagram stuff and raise awareness about the protest. But then it's mostly only because there's a lot of people in the area and the base stations cannot hold it up. So this is also the last mile problem. And finally, and probably the worst thing, is that our internet service providers are doing a lot of oversubscription. So their oversubscription rates are probably 10 to 1. So basically, they sell much more bandwidth than they have because they presume that we will not all be streaming high definition video or doing intensive stuff on the internet at the same time, which actually happens. So basically, if they have a capacity of 100 megabits or whatever, and then they sold it to 100 people, and then they all start using the internet at the same time, then this oversubscription can be a really big issue. And even before the curfew, I even have had a lots of problems in my in where I live because my internet service provider oversubscribed much more than they were able to. So I had to end the contract and start searching for another solution because it was just unbearable. They sold much more than they can that they can provide. Finally, we have this centralization of web services, of course, the thing that we are all using the same services, not maybe us in this conference, but our friends who are not like the tech and privacy and open source enthusiasts. People started using Skype and Teams, and even Jitsi was not working well because, I mean, if everyone's using the same services, it just cannot work. So how do we deal with this? We have these two solutions. One is good neighbor mitigation. It's a really fast and easy solution. And another one is community mindset change. I'm sorry, I don't know about the time when the Jari should start, but maybe Des, you can, or someone can write me down how much time do I have. So good neighbor mitigation would be something that we also released in, okay, 8 minutes, that's fine, I can finish it. So, so if we want to mitigate, and what we were asking people to do when the issue started on 16th of March, we did an infographic, which is also in this survival kit we released, that's called Let's Not Break the Internet. So we actually asked people to try to save some resources for their neighbors. How it's being done, to maybe try streaming less music, movies, or TV shows. Maybe try to listen to old MP3s, local media, CD, DVD, and vinyl collections, which we call dead media today. Maybe disable autoplay on streaming services, because a lot of people just play stuff and then they go somewhere and leave it playing. And automatic media download is also a big thing at the moment in these messaging apps. So we also asked people to use data savers on browsers, apps, and OS, switch to audio instead of video calls at the most intense times. Like usually when the curfew would start at 6 p.m., it was unbearable to use internet. So if everyone would be using audio instead of video calls, much less traffic would be generated. So of course, unless it's a first date, because people started dating during the curfew, and I guess you should see if you're dating. So then we asked people to binge audio podcasts. There is a theory that listening without visuals boosts your imagination, and download stuff by night or turn off Wi-Fi routers and mobile data while sleeping, because as we said, we want to relax 2.4 gigahertz bands and 4G base stations, which were all under high pressure at the moment. So less devices working at the same time, the better the infrastructure is working. So we also call people to play single player and local multiplayer games, which is not so popular these days. Story mode, split screen, and hot seat instead of MMOs and today's popular stuff that's really hard on the infrastructure. And finally, take a break from Apple. This is where the zero rating thing is not helping, because lots of people have zero rating on their mobile subscription services, and they will endless scroll their Instagram and Instagram stories, which is all mostly video. So it's not so good. So this is my final slide. The second solution would be community mindset change, and it might be a recipe for next generation resilient internet. We can discuss it later, but it would probably be IPv6 community mesh networks. So we need to start building in Serbia. We used to have them during the late 90s and beginning of the 2000s, some independent Wi-Fi mesh networks. Now we don't have them anymore. We are dependent on these big companies, and of course peer-to-peer applications. it would be good to do these web services decentralization, and of course never stop striving for the alternatives. I'm really happy that that the team from Hack Lab and Descon is using BBB for this conference. I know it was hard. They had lots of hard time like trying to figure it out because it's not out of the box solution like Zoom or some other services, but I really think it's worth it, and that we should all strive and go around, tell our friends and make them use some alternative stuff, open source stuff, and so we together try to be more resilient in the future. So I think that's it. Thank you very much, guys, for your attention, and yeah, we can chat about it afterwards.
Thank you, Filip, for taking us through this. I forgot to mention that one of your current projects is also 1,000 cameras, and that people can still ask a question. They can unmute themselves and they can pose a question, and we're just gonna ask Jari to give him a presenter mode so he can upload his slides. And but in the meantime, we open the chat room for any questions to you. Jari, were you able to switch your slides, please?
Yeah, I'm working on that.
It may take a few minutes as well, and it may also be good to flick through them. And sometimes there's a little bit of a lag. Thanks. Okay, we're going to have a couple of minutes here at the back of the room to see how we're going to sort this. So please wait with us. Thank you.
I can see my presentation now. I don't know if you see the screen with empty on it.
It's no longer a presenter. Okay. Yes. See you.
Are we good? Yeah, perfect. So I guess we can start. So thank you for this opportunity to talk about this topic, and I really enjoyed Filip's presentation, and this slightly different angle, not so much from the local problems, and this presentation isn't about sort of minimizing any of the problem, but this is more about like trying to find data that various researchers have gathered or various providers have gathered on how the networks are doing and what's happening. And it's important to sort of remember that there's a difference between like, you know, what the network is doing and what's your local experience. For one thing, you might have had sort of independent issues anyway, that your connection wasn't really working well. I've certainly had those in my network. I have a fiber connection at home, and it's not up to the spec that it should be, but that's unrelated to this year's events. The other thing is that this pandemic has made many things sort of essential. Like instead of, yeah, I have an option to watch Netflix or go to the movies, but now you only have the Netflix option. And you can't do your work unless you actually have working internet connection, and in many cases video calls and so forth. So that's the sort of the context where we need to look at this. But back to the data. So if we go, let's see if I can flip the slides. I think I can. Yes. And now you should see the background slide. So we've had obviously a big impact of this crisis on people, and you know, tragic implications and so on. Big impact on the society, and the claim is that it's also a big impact on networking. I would actually claim that it's the biggest impact that we've seen on the internet, basically ever, in terms of the numbers and quality of the changes or qualitative aspects of those changes. And there has been a lot of interesting work this year in the academic community, research work. There's been sort of standards tracking of things, like, for instance, we at the Internet Architecture Board, which is a group of 13 people thinking about internet trends. We've been looking at this. The industry has been working on this, both from a research angle and doing all the practical work that's needed. And there's a lot of, like, I should be clear that I haven't done any of this research that I'm going to be talking about. I'm just collecting it. So I'm the organizer of a workshop on COVID-19 impacts on internet at the IAB. We have a set of position papers from really interesting places and really interesting papers. Do take a look. The URL is there. You get there by iab.org. If you don't have to write that whole thing down. Also, one of my backgrounds is that I work at Ericcsson. And we do like quarterly reports of what's happening with mobile networks and internet in general. So we track like what applications people are using, how the traffic is changing, and so on. And so I'm picking some things from there, but also a lot of things from other researchers. So this is not an Ericsson thing only. So a lot of the things that I'll be talking about have been public statements by various parties or research papers in the workshop or elsewhere. There's also been a recent, actually this week, or like ending today, the IMC 2020 conference that is looking at measurements, internet measurements conference, and I presume there'll be lots of interesting stuff there as well. So do take a look if you have a possibility at some point. So what happened? Lots of things, like the simple numbers are, you get slightly different numbers depending on who you listen to. Filip gave sort of the extreme case of 60% increase. In some places. We've seen more generally like this fixed networks like DSL, fiber. We've seen 30%, 20% increase numbers in a lot of different places. For mobile networks, depending on your source, Vodafone said that they saw 50 to 30% increase across their networks, depending on the location, like Spain and Italy were more impacted than by the virus, and also they had a bigger impact on the mobile networks than other places. We at Ericsson measured something from a slight decrease to about a 20% increase, depending again on the location. Like in some areas of the world, if you're working from home, you are primarily fixed network connected. In some other areas of the world, you are mobile connected, so that plays a role. IXPs saw an increase. We also saw an increase on traffic direction. So in some cases, we saw, like in the mobile networks, that the upload or the uplink traffic went up 100%. And sometimes these things can have a significant impact on how the network have been provisioned and how much it can carry and so on. And some predictable growth returned later. So these numbers are more like the March, April numbers. And since then, it's been a little bit more like, going down a little bit and then growing in a more regular fashion. It's also interesting to look at the geographical things. The picture on the left is a picture of Paris. And green means the bandwidth went down, and red means it went up. And so you would see, like, predictably, downtown areas, not as many people, not as much traffic, and in the rural or residential areas, you see traffic increases. And let's see. And then that's sort of on the level of the whole traffic. But then if you look at individual applications, you get, of course, very different situations. So meeting services, and so this would be like e-learning or remote work and video conferences and the one like we are just having right now. And we saw obviously very big numbers, and depending a little bit how you count, if you count number of users, which went up very much, or bytes or minutes of meetings and so on. WebEx, which is a service by Cisco, basically grew twice as much, or grew doubled in size in 4 weeks. did that almost for 2 months in a row. So they went from 7 billion minutes of meetings to 22 billion minutes of meetings between February and April. It's quite remarkable, and I mean there must be a lot of capacity in their services in order to be able to provide that. Which they largely did, but with a lot of background work. And one interesting thing on the right, you see this graph, and that is actually from the beginning of the year, from January onwards, and it's the WebEx traffic. So this is like a one meeting service provider, and you see a bump like during the February timeframe, and that is actually China. So you get this signal in this data that Chinese, for some reason, started working from home, and because the WebEx market share isn't maybe that great in China, you wouldn't see like a huge impact as you would see if the whole world, or let's say the Western world, would switch to remote working. But you saw a blip on the radar sort of, and one of their conclusions was that you could actually predict some of these things. Like, I don't know how well they prepared for this, but they certainly had the data to see that, hey, now something's going on. If this spreads to other parts of the world, then we will have a huge peak later. And they did have a huge peak. So I thought that was interesting. The other thing is applications, quite predictably. This is Ericsson research. Like travel applications were not as much used. I wonder why. And then remote working apps, e-learning apps, wellness apps, education apps, social shared experiences, health consultation, all of those things grew quite a lot. So those were the kinds of things that were replacing the travel and booking and ride-hailing apps, for instance. And of course, you have like different kinds of things within that. I think the overall conclusions are that like Ericsson asked 11,000 people in different countries, and these people had said that, or 9 out of 10 people in this group said that they had increased their online activities and also increased their online hours. Online hours increased, I think, by 2.5 hours for fixed networks and 1 hour for mobile networks. Personally, I don't know what those people were doing before, because I'm not sure how I could add more online hours to my day, except maybe by sleeping less. But there's also likely long-term impacts. So we would see like the elderly report that they learn to use video calls with their family. We would see lots of organizations like schools and new types of users, like kids in school, to adopt these technologies. So now we have this situation where there's infrastructure in schools and familiarity for kids and the elderly and so on, and other people to use this technology. So that's probably going to have an impact going forward. And also, everybody thinks that these services are actually now crucial. It's crucial for you to be able to do your work, for instance. So resiliency and capacity are going to be in people's minds. And maybe one of the things that the community can do, like I really like care about your neighbor approach that Filip had. But I think it would be useful also to track a little bit, like, you have 3 providers, how are they doing in terms of their capacity? And maybe you should switch to the one that is providing better service. So I think that would be a useful thing as well. Congestion. So that's an interesting question. This is a thing that could be measured in many different ways. So I'm presenting only one peek into the situation. We have, like in the IAB workshop, we have lots of papers on this topic, or at least several papers on this topic, looking at different aspects and different places, from last mile to other places. This one is at the level of the interconnects between different networks. And this is sort of an example of research by Dave Clark, sent a paper for our workshop. And they've been tracking congestion from 2016 onwards. And you see this on this graph. That's like for two example providers, Comcast and AT&T. And you see some peaks there, like there was one in 2017 and one in 2018. And then it's far more unclear in 2020. So basically his conclusion in this research was that at the level of sort of this like the global connectivity and connectivity between providers, there wasn't a huge difference that the pandemic would have caused in the congestion in networks. This is at least partially supported by other work that has looked at this interconnect level congestion. It might be a different thing entirely for last mile, as Filip noted. And also, if you look at the more detailed level, you would see things like, well, between Comcast and this other provider, there is congestion on, for them, for this one pair of communicating parties. That's a problematic area, but it doesn't show up at the level of the entire system. So what can we conclude? I think these were fairly big immediate shifts, huge shifts. I would also tentatively claim that this was a relatively smooth process. And maybe that's a disagreement with Filip. Maybe that's a just more positive way of looking at things, or maybe it's a more limited way of looking at things. But let's talk a little bit about like why that might actually be the case. So one is that you have like several of these providers were actually investing quite a lot. Like they changed their plans to add more hardware because of the additional traffic. So that happened in the background. People wouldn't necessarily see it. But also we have like this cloud deployment model and CDN deployment model, which makes it easier to shift things. Like if your travel app isn't needing 10,000 servers this month, then you can scale down your Amazon allocation. And similarly, if your e-learning thing is needing 10,000 more servers this month because of the school kids, then you can fairly easily allocate that. You don't have to buy new servers. You just say, Mr. Amazon, let's give us more servers, please. And also the internet model isn't like, it's not tailored to a particular application. So it doesn't really care, like anything works. And to some extent, like it's not fully optimized either, but that's actually a benefit when you try to switch suddenly. Like we don't know, but it was hard to predict that this would exactly happen the way it did. It's hard to predict what the next catastrophe is. And so therefore it's better to be more general than very specific, that we can do this video thing now very, very optimally. But maybe we don't need video next time, we need something else. So research that we did at Ericcsson said that 6 people out of 10 were very satisfied with their fixed broadband. Now this is, a lot of people were asked about, but it's only in 11 different countries. So it's a limited view. And also we could have a discussion whether 60% is a good number or a bad number. On the mobile network side, 75% of the people said that their mobile broadband experience was the same or better than before the crisis. And again, it's a little bit difficult to determine, what does this mean? Like, it sounds like a good number. On the other hand, were they happy before or not? It doesn't actually say, because this was the question that we asked, not if they were happy and satisfied and so on, in the case of mobile networks. But overall, 83% people were feeling that IT has helped them, at least in this crisis. Whether it has helped sufficiently is a different question. So, summary of the summary, we think this COVID-19 thing was far bigger event than any other events in all of internet history that I would claim, at least, in terms of its size, at least. Of course, there's been technical changes in the technology over the years. We could also claim that the internet is alive and kicking because of this modularity, general nature, cloud tech, and lots of hard background work. And this isn't to say that there's no problems. There's a huge number of problems in the internet, like from privacy and lack of access for some people, like, in some places, even in the US, like in the rural areas, it's difficult for some kids to have access. That may not be a technical issue, but maybe more of a commercial or economic or broadband policy issue that you could change that if you had a different government regulation, for instance. And I didn't speak too much of this, like how does the internet evolve on this talk. I've talked about it in other contexts, but this is like a good example of like we can switch from all of this into some other application quite rapidly, and it's in the category of things that have enabled the internet to work or to evolve a little bit better than it did in the past. So a lot of the things today are in the applications rather than in the kernels of Linux and so forth. Like QUIC is a new transport protocol that works in the application instead of TCP that worked in the kernel of machines. So it's an easier thing to change. We've seen a lot of change, technical change that went from like in a couple of years, we went from 20% encryption in the internet to 80 or 90%, nearing 100% today. The final warning is that you should do your own math and draw your own conclusions. Don't necessarily believe what my research says or the research that I'm reporting about, because there's lots of research. Maybe it would be useful to collect more data actually, and track your neighborhood ISPs and their performance, for instance. But don't necessarily believe either. Like there's people who say that, well, because this internet is performing poorly, we then need a new internet. Maybe that's not the thing that we need. We might perhaps need some more investment and certain types of regulation in some cases. But I think the internet technology as such is doing relatively well. But I think I'll stop here. I've already spent too much time, I think, talking. Be happy to discuss further. I'm not sure if I can answer questions, but we can discuss.
Thank you very much, Jari, for your presentation. I think we're getting some questions in the room for you. So if you'd like, you can continue answering them. I can read them out. Yeah,
I can see them, so it's easy for me to read. So which countries is the data from? I don't remember the exact list, but it's mostly, I would say, sort of Western world. So it's US, UK, I think, Sweden, but also like Japan and China, and if I remember correctly, then Brazil. So some developing nations, but it was 11 countries, so it's not a huge section of the countries in the world. So, and again, so that's like we asked some set of people in the world. It's a small set of countries and people, not the full scope.
Thank you. I think you have more questions coming up, and also there is the Serbian Networks Operators Group meeting taking place in November, and maybe your suggestion for them to go and do some more measurements here is a good suggestion. I'll just put a link.
It's always good to understand how your service providers are performing and whether you're happy with. I mean, it's like a society question almost. It's not just that you as a consumer get what you pay for, but also that if your service providers are having a resilient network with enough capacity, then that could mean like a big difference between the economic outcomes in a pandemic situation.
we have multiple users typing, I think, so one of the questions is going to pop up soon. But also feel free to say a question and switch on your camera, take your mic.
Yeah, and Monica is asking about, not about capacity, but wave of requests to access to encrypted communications for law enforcement. It's a big thing going on. I think there's some history to this. Like at the IETF, we've been having this discussion with the law enforcement agencies and regulators and governments since the 1990s, or even maybe earlier. I'm not quite sure about the earlier, but definitely from the early 90s. And like every decade, basically, there's this discussion. And I think the technical community generally has concluded that no, it's not possible to provide like this global access to encrypted communications without at the same time making those communications very vulnerable to attacks. And I think it's a trade-off that the governments should also recognize. Like they clearly like the society likes catching criminals, for instance. That's good. But first of all, we have a lot of information, far more information about people's movements and people's activities today, even if we don't give the police all the contents of all communications. So one should factor that in. And secondly, the trade-off, like if you can catch all the criminals, but your banking system is vulnerable to all kinds of major catastrophes because you enabled broken encryption. And I don't think that's a good trade-off for society. We basically collapse some of the structures. Like we depend on encryption and stability of our services. And I think the issue actually is that it's not only governments. Like everybody wants data, of course, but I think we should go in a different direction. We should go into reducing the amount of information available to different parties. So one of the problems is that we give a lot of information to the Facebooks and Googles of the world, and maybe that's not so sensible. We should reduce that information flow, make it more of a user-only thing, and even if those companies operate potentially quite honestly and do their best, but they can have accidents, for instance, or attacks where data is lost. We just saw in Finland this case where there was this health provider who was providing like therapist services or psychiatric treatment for tens of thousands of people, and for each of those people they held this record of like what was discussed during this session, and then they lost that data, and now it's on sale on the Tor networks, and that's not good. I think we need to be really careful about where we give information. Okay, a rant over. Subscription at some big ISPs. It's a good question. I think it goes into this, like, what do you actually get out of your subscription that you contracted with somebody? And it seems to be like a two-way street, that you promise that you will only use maximum 10 gigabits per month or whatever until you are maybe throttled down a little bit. But at the same time, they promise that they will give you reasonably speedy service, and making sure that everybody holds to their end of the contract is kind of important. So that label numbers that this is a 100 meg connection or a gigabit connection is just one aspect, but it's maybe not the true picture. So we should measure the true picture, and I think there's some room for community action, and there's been lots of efforts throughout the world to be able to measure broadband speeds, and not just by the providers, but also by others or independent parties. Yeah, Filip comments that contracts often say what is the maximum speed. Yeah, I mean, it can be the case that it's not really a question of like the contract language. They usually are written in a way that they have an out, but at the same time, like there's this publicity thing that if people know that, well, in this provider, if you order a 1 gigabit fiber connection, but you only get 100 megabits, then maybe that's not good for them or their marketing. So consumers having access to information is important. And Desiree, you asked about this energy resources used by the internet and data centers and ICT. Do people at the IETF or IRTF think about this? Yes, they do. And they also think about this in the industry. I can speak for the mobile industry. We do think about that quite a lot, and spend a fair amount of effort trying to cut down the energy consumption of our radio base stations, for instance. It's like a key metric that our customers at Ericsson, for instance, buy equipment, and how much power does it consume. It's also a practical issue. So we do think about it. There's been some efforts, like discussions that should we start something bigger, some bigger effort on this, but mostly the answer has been that no, it's not easy to start any big project. It's more of a detailed thing that we need to make sure that the individual pieces of technology that we provide are well designed from the energy consumption point of view.
Thank you, Jari. That begs the question, the example you've just given us, does it mean that maybe 5G would be using less energy than 4G network and 3G network if the improvement goes that way, and the engineers and mobile operators are thinking about that?
They are thinking about it, and certainly like the efficiency is improving. At the same time, speeds are going higher, and the needs for HD movies and so forth or more needs are presented to the system, that we need more bandwidth basically. But at the same time, like there's some technical aspects, like in 5G, the highest speeds are on a shorter distance from the base station. And so it's not always clear that bigger speed equals more power consumption, because you also have to transmit a lower distance. And 5G, for instance, has this capability to do something called beamforming, that you have, like not one antenna or a couple of antennas sort of broadcasting a very large area, but you have very narrow beams of radio energy. Like I'm giving the signal to this particular phone in this direction, which makes it easier to try and control like you can pack more things into the same area, of course, and have more customers, but also that you only have to use a smaller amount of energy in order to reach that one party, because it's not radiated all over the place for no reason. And so I don't have, like, if you're looking for like the final answer, like, okay, how many percent? I can't give you, but so I'm not really the expert on this radio technology as much as some of my colleagues are, but it's a key factor being looked at, and there's lots of factors embedded inside it, and it's not a simple equation that people might think that faster means more power waste. Definitely not.
Thank you for that answer. We have also a comment in the chat room from Monica Ermert saying you don't need more base stations due to shorter distances, or do you?
Yes, you do, of course, but like the thing is that you would have like for an equal number of consumers using the service, you would be able to, like, I can serve a particular customer. Like, let's say everything else is equal, but the base stations are, you know, placed more close to the consumers, then you would be able to communicate with the consumer or the phone using, you know, shorter distance and potentially less energy. Now, of course, you can also increase the number of people using this service. You can increase the amount of data sent. You can have other technical improvements. You can have this beamforming thing. Like, there's so many factors that it's not a simple algorithm to calculate like what the energy impact is.
Thank you very much, Jari, and thank you very much, Filip. I believe we have no more questions for you, and though you only said you'll give us a lightning talk, we'd really appreciate you taking you to this survey. We'd like to maybe follow up with you on the exact number of countries of this study, if you can send them. Yeah, you are. People are thanking you, and I'd like to thank also everyone who joined us this evening. Our community is growing here, and hopefully we'll see some of you again tomorrow, where we have really two great sessions. One from Vladan Joller on extractivism and the use of energy sources, and the other one from Chris de Decker, who is the founder of Low Tech magazine, and he'll be telling us how to set up a web server powered by the solar panels. So I hope some of you could come back. We'll send our links as usual via email. Please complain if you think you're getting too many, and feel free to share the links as well with your colleagues. We had a lot of people registered and interested in different discussions. So with a big round of applause for Filip and for Jari, I will play some music and see you all tomorrow.
Thanks, everyone.
Dobrodošli na Descon 6 online od 27. do 31. oktobra.